like to thank, first of all, the Tri-County Council for partnering with us, the Southern Maryland delegation. I'd also like to thank the Virginia Department of Transportation. If you notice on their information sheets, we are not cited. But in contacting them, they were gracious enough to come in and to modify their schedule because I appreciate the fact that they know that Southern Maryland, we are impacted and part of the system that will use transportation connecting with Route 495. So I want to thank them. I also like to thank the Maryland Department of Transportation representatives for being here as well. This was a last minute request, but they are here because all of us understand the need for this information to be offered to you. It's an information, and it also will address some of the concerns and questions that you have, as well as the challenges. And so I'm here to say that we are representing the constituents of Calvert, Charleston, St. Mary's, and to share their concerns, as well as to offer suggestions as well. This is an opportunity because we understand the magnitude of potentially the impact it will have on our commuters and our travelers. So again, thank you very much for being here, and we certainly appreciate your presence.
Thank you, Delegate Patterson. Thank you very much. Again, thank you guys for coming. Chair C.T. Wilson, Delegate C.T. Wilson. I'm also Chair of the House Economic Matters Committee. Apologize, I'm just getting out of court. I just want to say that again, I appreciate MDOT and VDOT coming today, and I understand that these plans were laid some time ago, but I have extraordinarily grave concerns about the impact to our region, Charles County, with some specificity. I think that many times we get overlooked when it comes to traffic. We get overlooked when it comes to our share of the tax revenue and the roads. So what we don't want to do is add on to the difficulty that many of us have going to work. I, for one, drive out of this county many days because as an attorney, my office is in La Plata and in Upper Marlboro. And I understand my wife drives out here the same way. We want to make sure that when she goes up 210 that she doesn't have any more congestion than she needs. And I understand this is part of a larger agreement. You know, this is the American Legion Bridge, where I guess originally Governor Hogan agreed that Maryland was going to put tolls on the American Legion Bridge, and then Virginia would be responsible for the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. However, as you see that that's been scrapped. They're not doing that. We don't have the money, number one, so we would not be doing that even if it was something that we thought was a good idea. I am quasi open-minded, I guess, to hear what these benefits would be. But as the research I've done, I talked to Mark Corman, who's the head of, who chairs our Environment Transportation Committee, and he's a MoCo delegate as well. So he really has the same viewpoints, I believe, that most of us have here, which is what might look good on paper. Sounds like a good idea, does not really work in practice. And I will say this, those of us who were around a long time ago, you remember when they tried to do, DJS tried to build a detention center down in by Acton Lane? I don't know if anybody remembers that. Remember that?
Yes.
And it wasn't a group much bigger than this to stop that. So please don't think your voice doesn't count. And you have people that are going to fight for you, because at the end of the day, I know that the people from MDOT and VDOT here, I appreciate them being here. I know they have a job to do, but jobs change. People go different directions, and I just want to make sure that you guys understand that I'll be very direct. I am not supporting this. I was just texting Governor Moore because he's a friend of mine, and I really want to see the voice of people heard and stuff like this. So that's why I popped in here today. I appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Commissioner Vice President Ralph Patterson, and welcome to District 4, wonderful Waldorf. And so I'm just glad to hear and see so many people coming out tonight to hear what is going on in our area. A lot of times people only hear about stuff after it's already happened. This is a great opportunity for people to know what's going on and actually have a voice and to say we want to go in one direction or another. I'm also very thankful for Maryland Department of Transportation as well as the Virginia Department of Transportation for coming out here and giving this presentation, I'm guessing, for the 100th time But I'm glad to see that you guys are here in person and not doing it virtual. And so I just want to say thank you for making the trip down here, as well as our delegation from Annapolis. It's glad to hear us all speaking in the same language and pushing in the same direction. And so that's very encouraging to have, you know, the synergy from La Plata to Annapolis. And I'm just, once again, very glad to see as many people here as possible. We see community leaders. President Sweat is here from the NAACP, as well as various other organizations here in the county. It's good to see the amount of interest that this could have on us, because I'll be honest, I'm one of those poor and fortunate souls that has to go up the 210 corridor to 295 to go to work every day. And when I saw this come across my desk, the only thing I could think of was, how is this going to benefit Charles County? And I tried to think, went to the presentations, the earlier ones in April, went to the ones post afterwards and saw the recommendation, and that wasn't what the people said on both sides of the river. And so my concern is that, you know, this is going to be something that is not going to be what the people want. And in Charles County, we try to make sure that we have the pulse of the people as much as possible. And not to toot our own horns, but we have our Southern Maryland rapid transit system that's going in. That is exactly what the people have asked for. Rapid rail transit as well as a bus service. And so the solutions are out there. It's just a matter of making the ideas fit to what the people want and not the other way around. So just thank you very much, George, and here you go.
Thank you. All right, again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and a little bit of a background on how we got here. Boy, I'm straddling all over this place. I want to thank Commissioner Patterson, first of all, because he brought it to my attention in April. It caught a lot of us off guard. Very surprisingly, when I sit on 7 committees at WashCog and was not aware of this. And as he mentioned, I have a stepdaughter down there that uses that bridge every day. It's not only going to impact Southern Maryland, but it's going to impact all of Marylanders. And let me just give you a little brief history. With Charles County, 70% of our residents work out of county. They work in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. metro area. So there's a lot of traffic crossing that area, as we all know, MDOT, VDOT. And so with that said, Delegate Patterson reached out to me and asked, please help partner with them to get this put together. And I know it was kind of a short notice, but we tried to do the best we can to at least get the public aware of what's coming down the road. And I gotta admit, on my end, and what I do as a transportation director, but a transportation specialist, I've never seen a study move so fast as this one is. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, these guys are getting ready to go right into NEPA. And that's, when you get to NEPA study, it's pretty much all downhill from there. I mean, well, depends on how you look at it.
What does NEPA stand for?
That's a good question, I keep forgetting. It's National Environmental, yes. For years I call it NEPA, that's what everybody calls it. But we are moving that fast. And I do see Commissioner Collins coming in now. And Terrence. Congressman Hoyer's office. Thank you, Terrence. And I'll back up a second. We'll wait for Commissioner Collins to come up and see if he has any remarks. Terrence?
Yeah, if he has remarks, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Terrence, do you have any remarks from?
Okay.
All right, let me try this again. Commissioner Collins, welcome. Commissioner President Collins. Let me correct myself.
Good evening, everybody. Again, Reuben Collins. I'm here, just like all of you, to get as much information as we possibly can about this issue. I became familiar with this as part of my responsibilities with the Council of Governments Transportation Planning Board. This was approximately a year or so ago, and at that time I had no idea that this thing would escalate to the extent that it has. And so as county government representatives, we are extremely concerned about the potential, but we are here to learn and listen and be prepared to respond if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, people, be gentle with me. This is my first time doing this. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move into the presentation by VDOT. And Michelle, did you want to come up here? And you want me to bring you the mic? Okay. And then after their presentations, then we will open some discussion first from the elected officials to the VDOT, MDOT? Yes. And then, well, actually, yes, MDOT. And then we'll open the floor for the public, and we'll bring the mic down and let y'all, if anybody has anything they want to say. I also want to add that the Citizens Against the 495 Express Lane is in no way affiliated with VDOT, MDOT, or the Tri-County Council. And just want to make that clear. So with that, Michelle, turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate the invitation from the Tri-County Council. My name is Michelle Shropshire. I'm the Mega Projects Director for Northern Virginia District VDOT. And I'm joined tonight by a few members of my team. Michelle Holland is our Mega Projects Communications Manager. We have Vahid Mushtaq, who is Mega Projects, our traffic subject matter expert. We also have Brian Campbell with us here from our Mega Projects team, and he is one of our NEPA subject matter experts. We also brought a few of our display boards that we had from our public hearing. We didn't bring our whole complement of those boards tonight. I think we have about 30 boards in total, but we did bring a few of the keyboards. They're in the back of the room, so I hope you can have a few minutes to take a look at those. We will be moving through the slide deck that we presented at our public hearings. We just wrapped up 4 public hearings in Virginia over the past 2 weeks. So that's the presentation that we'll be making for you this evening. Our public comment period is still open for our public hearing series that we just wrapped up. So if you would like to make formal comments relative to the public hearings, we brought some brochures with us tonight. And on our final slide, you'll have some information on how you can send those in to us to be part of the record for that public hearing. So on our first slide, just wanted to talk about the managed lane network that extends across the Northern Virginia region. 94 miles have really transformed how traffic is managed in our interstate system. This provides reliable, faster travel on those lanes. These are not simply tolled lanes. They kind of get labeled as tolled lanes, but they're managed lanes. Anyone can use the express lanes. They are free for 3 or more passengers in a single occupancy vehicle. So if you're driving your car and have 3 or more friends or family members in your car, those lanes would be able to be used for free. They're also free for bus transit. So bus transit that operates on those lanes does use them for free. This is important to note because we'll talk about how these lanes would implement some new transit service and how that transit service would then build future ridership for other forms of transit such as Metro Rail. Also, these lanes can be used for free by school buses. We have that occurring across the region's managed lane network in Virginia. On our next slide, we'll talk about the specific project we're here to talk about tonight, the 495 Southside Express Lane Study. As mentioned, this is a NEPA study. That's the National Environmental Policy Act. We are conducting this study on 11 miles of the Capitol Beltway. It begins just east of the Springfield interchange. That's the western termini that you see on the slide. It carries eastward across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and then the eastern termini is at the Maryland 210 interchange. You can also see on this slide the proposed access points that are highlighted in blue. This is the last segment of 495 where express lanes or managed lanes have not been implemented. This was identified in the Transportation Planning Board's part of COG's 2045 visualized plan, and it was one of their aspirational initiatives identified in that plan to expand the express lanes network. On our next slide, we talk about just some of the reoccurring traffic conditions that exist on this segment of the Beltway, which is not a surprise to anyone. In the mornings in the westbound direction, there's considerable congestion that is expected to double by our horizon year that we've been looking at for this study, which is 2050. In the evenings, in the eastbound direction, you'll see that those travel times by 2050 are expected to more than double. Limited travel choices along the corridor, which express lanes would support. Limited travel choices for those bus transit operators, as well as limited bicycle and pedestrian connections throughout those existing communities along the corridor. And we'll talk about how this project could enhance those for the communities that surround the 495 corridor. On our next slide, we'll talk about the background for the study and how we got to where we are. The study did kick off in 2022. You can see some of the milestones on this slide on the upper right-hand side. This has been included in VDOT 6-year improvement plan, as well as that 2045 constrained long-range plan, as I mentioned. Early in the study, we identified 10 different study alternatives that we assessed impacts for. We established a purpose and need for the project. We've done various different levels of analyses, and we've narrowed that range of 10 alternatives down to 3, a no-build and 2 build alternatives. There was a companion study conducted by a sister agency in Virginia, DRPT, that looked at some transit and travel demand alternatives, and we'll talk about how those will be layered into the recommended preferred alternative. And you see some of the corridor needs that were identified as part of our purpose and need on the right-hand side of the slide. On our next slide, we'll talk about some of the process that is involved in delivering a large-scale and lengthy process such as the 495 Southside project. And as you heard when the program tonight was opened, that once you hit NEPA, kind of is a done deal. Well, this slide will kind of show that that's really not the case. NEPA is just the start of a long set of things that need to happen in project development and delivery to deliver a large-scale process, and we're at the very beginning of that. During NEPA, you develop your purpose and need, you know, what transportation challenge you're really trying to solve. You do an initial traffic analysis, you look at impacts, you have public engagement opportunities. We've had 4 different public engagement opportunities over the life of the NEPA study since 2022. As we move forward with the project, we would have another detailed traffic analysis, and that's the IAR, Interchange Access Report. That's where we look at the corridor and the surrounding roads. We'd also look at procurement opportunities, or how best to deliver the project, whether through a traditional method or one of the more usual methods that we use, public-private partnership, or a P3 project. Most of our managed lane projects in Virginia have been delivered through this P3 model to ensure the very best delivery method and very best business deal is achieved for the citizens of the region. That's where key business terms are set for the project. In the delivery arena, that is where detailed design is often conducted, more opportunities for public engagement. Once we move into delivery, we also usually have our private partner. If it is a P3 project, that is usually our concessionaire. They finish out some of the detailed design. They move into permitting for the project. Again, some more public engagement opportunities. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this slide is there are many steps that have to happen, many opportunities for mitigations and refinements before the project is finalized and is brought finally to construction that you see on the right-hand side of that slide. So this is not the only opportunity that the public would have to put input into the project. On our next slide, we talk specifically about the NEPA process that we use in Virginia, how we initiate the study, talk about what challenge we're trying to solve. We talk about how we've looked at several preliminary alternatives that I mentioned earlier, how those were narrowed down to a more detailed range of alternatives that we did our detailed analyses on, including our preliminary traffic analysis that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And then we get down to our recommended preferred alternative, and that's what we've been presenting at our public hearings the past 2 weeks. And that is that little box you see with the star that says we are here. We have some additional public engagement opportunities and some additional approval points that are upcoming. And then we'll finish out our environmental assessment study later this year with another round of public hearings. On our next slide, you'll see the 3 study alternatives that were carried forward in our environmental assessment for detailed study. That was the no-build alternative, which is really the do-nothing alternative, and that's really a benchmark for comparison of our 2 build alternatives, which you see listed, which is the 1 express lane in each direction and the 2 express lanes in each direction. You'll also see some of the key features of each of those build alternatives listed. On our next slide, you'll see the recommended preferred alternative from our study, which is 2 express lanes in each direction. This would be 2 express lanes that would be buffer separated from the general purpose lanes. It's important to note that the same number of general purpose lanes that exist today on this section of the Capital Beltway would remain. So those would be the same number of local and through lanes that you're accustomed to seeing on this section of the Capital Beltway. You'll see some of the highlights that would be included with the recommended preferred alternative. And we'll talk about those in the coming slides about new transit service, bike and pedestrian improvements, and how space on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge could be used for this interim improvement, but looking forward to when the region is ready to implement a rail project, that could be done as well. On our next slide, we're going to talk about some specifics for the rationale, some of the rationale for the recommended preferred alternative. First, you'll remember we talked about that no-build condition and how traffic would just continue to get worse if nothing is done. I would mention that this is the only project that's currently being proposed for this segment of 495, and you can see those travel times will just continue to increase and get worse if nothing is built. You also notice if we compare the 2 express lane alternative to the 1 express lane alternative, we're able to move more people with the 2 express lane alternative, up to 600 more people per hour. You also see some faster travel times that are noted on the slide in front of you, and I think it's important to note that these faster travel times benefit the general purpose lanes. So that means if you choose not to use managed lanes if they're implemented, you will still see the benefits of the implementation of the managed lanes. Specifically, our traffic analysis has demonstrated that the local lanes will see benefit. Those are the lanes that you use to make your movements on and off those local interchanges from 495 presently. The graphic on the right-hand side of this slide shows travel speeds and those little numbers. You might not be able to read those from your seats, but we have our display board in the back that you can take a look at. And these demonstrate for the no-build, the 1 express lane, and the 2 express lane alternative, that you can see the 2 express lane alternative does achieve some faster travel speeds for the 2 express lane alternative, which is our recommended alternative. On our next slide, we'll talk about just some more benefits of the 2 express lane alternative. Faster, more reliable trips for those who wish to use the express lane. This is especially important to note because this attracts carpool use. Across the Northern Virginia managed lane network, every day there are 18,000 carpool trips that use those lanes. So that's 18,000 trips that use those lanes for free. There's 2,600 bus trips. So these are an attractor, and it also builds a base for transit service. That base could then future turn into riders that would use a future metro rail system. 2 express lanes also allows for passing of slower moving vehicles. This has safety and operational benefits over a 1 express lane alternative. Also, we have additional capacity from our traffic analysis that demonstrates we would not be creating any new congestion points at the eastern termini. And as we've mentioned, and we'll talk about in a future slide, that we'll be using that unoccupied space that exists today on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge with an eye to the future for future expansion when the region is ready to implement a rail project. On our next slide, we'll talk about how multimodal aspects will be layered into our recommended preferred alternative. These will be part of the environmental assessment, so they'll be listed as commitments in that document, which are legally enforceable. The first we'll talk about is a new transit service. This was identified in the study I mentioned earlier that was conducted by our sister agency, DRPT. This would be a new bus service between Central West Prince George's County and Tysons, Virginia. This is currently being included in the Transportation Planning Board's air quality conformity analysis that's being modeled presently. So again, this would be included with the project in the environmental assessment. On the next slide, we'll talk about other multimodal improvements that will be included in the environmental assessment as commitments, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Our study team looked at areas along the corridor where there are gaps in the existing network of either sidewalk or shared use path, and look for opportunities where we could fill in these gaps either in the sidewalk or shared use path network. And what you see on this slide before you are some locations where these will be filled in, both in Virginia and in Maryland. On our next slide, we have some information about how the space that is vacant today on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, when it was built to accommodate either a future HOV, transit, or rail, and how that space can be used in the near term for a 2 express lane alternative that's depicted on the graphic on the bottom right-hand side of that slide. And then in the future, how that can be converted to a 1 express lane in each direction, and then also have rail implemented. This would be a commitment that is made in the environmental assessment, which again is legally enforceable because that's a commitment made with the Federal Highway Administration. And also this would be terms that would be included in any P3 or public-private partnership agreement, which that is the contract, which is, again, a legal document for that project. We have had successful demonstration of this with our 66 outside the Beltway project. On the next couple slides, we just have a walkthrough of our recommended preferred alternative, the 2 express lanes in each direction. These show access points that are being proposed right now, and these again are just concept drawings. They also show some notes about where bike and pedestrian facilities will be included, as we just talked about on the last slide. They show some areas for potential noise mitigation areas. Those are not final. This is just very preliminary information about that. The noise mitigation will continue to evolve as we work through the project, as I talked about on the process slide. And we'll also have some areas denoted on these few slides for right-of-way impacts that we have identified at this stage of the project. All of those right-of-way impacts are in Virginia at this time. So the first slide is at the western termini. This is between the Springfield Interchange and Van Doren Street, and this shows the flyovers where you could gain access to and from the express lanes network, and also shows some areas for possible noise mitigation. On the next slide, we have the Van Doren Street interchange. This shows slip ramps where you would gain access to and from the system. Also shows some potential bike and pedestrian improvement areas, as well as some potential areas for right-of-way impacts. On the next slide, we have the Eisenhower Avenue area with some potential noise mitigation areas and bike and pedestrian improvement areas. Same with the next slide, still the Eisenhower Avenue area with potential noise mitigation areas and bike and pedestrian improvement areas. On our next slide, we have the Telegraph Road and Huntington Avenue area. These are potential noise mitigation areas as well as some additional areas for bike and pedestrian improvements. Next, we have the Route 1 interchange area. This shows access points to and from that Route 1 interchange, as well as bike and pedestrian improvements. Next, we have the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and this is where 2 express lane configuration would continue across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. Next, we would transition to the I-495 interchange. In this vicinity, our recommended preferred alternative would transition from 2 express lanes in each direction to 1 express lane in each direction. And then our last slide that depicts our recommended preferred alternative shows the eastern termini at the Maryland 210 interchange with ramps to that interchange as well as some areas denoting bike and pedestrian improvements. On our next slide, we have a summary of just some impacts from both the 1 express lane alternative and the 2 express lane alternative. I would note that these are from our NEPA study that has been conducted so far, and these are planning level approach. There'll be multiple opportunities for us to minimize this footprint, look for refinements and mitigations. There'll be additional public opportunities for comment on this. On our next slide, we highlight just the stakeholder engagement that has taken place for the project. Since we initiated in 2022, we've had multiple opportunities to engage with our federal partners, state partners, and localities. We've had regular NEPA meetings in both Virginia and Maryland. We've had a technical advisory group. We've also had public engagement opportunities, and you can see some of the statistics from those various meetings that we've had over the life of the project. On our next slide, we have the key study milestones. Kind of tells you where we've been with the project, with public engagement opportunities, kind of where we're headed. We have some touch points with our Commonwealth Transportation Board upcoming in the next several months. We'll be presenting to them in July and then again in September. There'll be some touch points for the project with the Transportation Planning Board coming up in the fall, and then again at the end of this calendar year when they vote on their visualized 2050 plan for the project. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have additional public hearings on the project for the environmental assessment in totality, and then in early 2026 we would expect a decision on the environmental assessment from the Federal Highway Administration. And then on our last slide, I believe, are ways that you can provide those comments to us. You can stay engaged on the project through our public website. There's a QR code you can scan. We also brought some brochures this evening. As I mentioned in the opening, we have our public hearing comment period that is open until June 26th. So you can go online and fill out a comment form. You can mail that to us. And so we would appreciate any comments that you have regarding the project. Thank you very much for allowing us to present this evening.
Thank you very much, Michelle. MDOT, would you all like to say a few words?
Sure. All right, well, first I'd like to thank the Tri-County Council and George for coordinating this and our local electeds here for having us today. The more information we can get out and share on a project, the better for anything we do. So really appreciate the time tonight. My name is Ray Morvac. I'm the Deputy Chief Engineer for Planning, Engineering, and Real Estate with the Maryland State Highway Administration. I'm here with Drew Morrison, who's your assistant what's your deputy senior policy for the Secretary's office under Secretary Wiedefeld. And also we have some other representatives in the office. We have Donna from our Office of Planning, April from our Office of Government Affairs, and Jim from our Office of Communications. All here today to hear any comments, issues, items that are identified. We appreciate the time. We've been working closely with VDOT over the last couple of years on this project. We thank them for their engagement and continued involvement with us throughout the process. We recognize the Woodrow Wilson Bridge is a major bottleneck affecting commuters on both sides of the river, whether driving or on transit. Both our Transportation Secretary Paul Wiedefield and Administrator Will Pines and the entire project team have been engaged in the project, listening to the concerns and perspectives of our Maryland local residents and communities, providing our input and helping provide data and information associated with the study as VDOT looks at the alternatives here. Throughout the process, we've been engaged in the NEPA effort with VDOT. We are taking a review of all the technical reports that are prepared as part of the National Environmental Policy Act process. That includes everything from environmental resources to traffic and transportation, noise, air quality, a lot of elements that go into the National Environmental Policy Act process and the relating requirements as part of that effort. So working closely to make sure that Maryland's view is given and we're able to give our input and feedback to ensure that the concerns of Maryland are met as the project moves through the National Environmental Policy Act process prior to a decision being made on the project. I do want to emphasize there are really, at this point, from what we've heard, there are really three main items that we continue to stress as concerns that we've heard not only from our technical reviews, but also from working with the local community, the public, and our elected officials. One of the main ones there is that this project should continue to support a multimodal future for the corridor by incorporating meaningful transportation commitments. We know that VDOT has a successful track record of investing in transit and benefits from past express lane projects. They've also made certain qualitative commitments, but we're really looking for a more qualified or quantitative side on that and what those commitments would be as part of this process. We also want to continue to support a multimodal future by not precluding a future Metro Rail extension. While VDOT's indicated that it will make a commitment in NEPA and the eventual contract to preserve rail on the bridge, we want to make sure that the specific contractual language, governance structure, and physical accommodations on the bridge are able to address that whenever and have that further defined to better understand that. We also want to make sure that we minimize impacts to adjacent and local roadways. We know there's a lot of concern on what's happening with the operations on the Capitol Beltway itself, but the impact of that as well on our local roadways is a big concern, particularly with the tie-ins at 295, Maryland 210, 414, and others to ensure. And we're just looking to ensure that we have that detailed analysis and information to be able to know what it means to those local roadways as well, to ensure that we can have an educated opinion prior to making a comment concerning the selection of a preferred alternative for the project. So with that, we're here to hear your comments tonight. We've been at all of the public hearings and public meetings from the beginning of this project to hear those concerns. We are here to be representing Maryland and make sure that Maryland interests are met and represented prior to a project moving forward within this area, particularly within the state of Maryland. So thank you for your time tonight and look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much, Ray. Before we open up, if there's any questions from the public, I'm going to defer to our elected officials to see if they have any questions first, and then we'll open up for any questions for the public.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. I think that Ray has asked most of the questions that I have, and it's really important. And I'm sure that VDOT has gotten a copy of those questions, and we hope that we will get a response because, again, we're here to represent and make sure that the public, those who are making comments, that those comments are taken into consideration. Because my question would be, the public comment sheet that's utilized and with a QR code, how is that impacting any decisions that are made? The other is benefits to the Maryland community. For example, the residents. In a former presentation, there was an indication that the funding would support many of the projects that are in Virginia. And so my question is, would there be any consideration for funding of projects in Maryland, for example, the future of the Metro Rail, or the future for staffing some of the concerns that we have, or even some of the programs that are cited. So again, I want to make sure that your comments are taken into full consideration before final decision is made. You have a comment?
I have a question. And this is obviously for NDOT. My question is, this is a point of clarification, I hope, is that this project will not go forward if both Maryland and Virginia don't agree, correct? So no, I understand, but I'm talking about but this project itself has to be agreed upon. This is not where Virginia gets to make a decision for Maryland, or Maryland's making a decision for Virginia, correct?
Yeah, we can explain on the mic.
Yes, but I just want to make sure that you do explain to the citizens where, because I don't want you to feel like this train is running you over.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay, because I know it's what it feels like, because when you hear the planning and you hear how fast it's moving forward, I beg to differ. So I just want to make sure you explain to my people, these citizens, that unless you guys, ergo our governor, ergo our electeds agree that this project goes forward, then it doesn't go forward.
Any other questions? Mr. President, you have a comment, question?
I think the sentiment was made very clear by Delegate Wilson. Again, I've been following the process, and what struck me from the beginning was it seemed to be really moving at a rapid pace. From my early understanding of the project last year to where we are today. I know that the NEPA process is a critical element, but from our vantage point, seeing this project almost move 2 times faster than Southern Maryland Rapid Transit as our overall priority, that was the thing that struck me looking at the rapid pace of this moving forward. I mean, it's encouraging to hear that there is a process in place that will continue to provide an opportunity for public input. That's extremely important. But it should be clear that the citizens are concerned about the potential that this may bring to transportation priorities in this corridor, because many of our residents rely on this corridor to go to work. So again, my bottom line is I want to hear, I want to understand, I want to be in a position where we can fully disclose this process directly to our citizens.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse, and it's so refreshing to hear our delegates of Annapolis and La Plata once again on the same page, saying the same thing, pulling in the same direction. And so my thing has always been, there have been several alternatives that have been put on the table. How did we come up with this one? And so how did this become the gold standard or the front runner as far as what the preferred alternative was going to be? And by that I mean, if both sides of the river, Potomac River, are against the project, how did it become the thing? And so that's what I've always wondered, is just how did we get to this point? And so that was always my question, but I would love an answer.
And we will go ahead and turn that back over to MDOT.
Sure, I'll take the chair's question, and then I'm happy to pass to VDOT on some of the other questions around the project. So as Ray mentioned, Drew Morrison, Senior Policy Advisor for Planning and Project Development in the Secretary's Office at MDOT. And to the core point of the chair's question, ultimately for a project in Maryland, Maryland would have to permit that project. So when you're talking about the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, when you're talking about the connection into southern Prince George's County, ultimately the decision that would be before the department would be to issue a permit for that work. And as the Secretary has said, and the Secretary has over the last few weeks engaged with leadership in the Prince George's delegation and the Southern Maryland delegation, we're listening very closely to the issues and concerns raised by Marylanders and bringing them into that process, but ultimately Maryland does have a say in something happening in Maryland.
Yeah, we got it. We got shorted a couple mics, and we apologize for that. VDOT, did y'all have a response for that? Would you like to respond or open to the public?
So I tried to jot down some of the questions, so I'll try to answer a couple there, and then we can continue the conversation. I guess one of the questions that was asked was really maybe the genesis of the project and how we started with this and how we move forward with looking at an express lane study. If we kind of go back in time a little bit, the Transportation Planning Board, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in the Visualized 2045 plan, identified as one of their aspirational initiatives to look at expanding the express lanes highway network. And they were ones that really initiated kicking off a study to look at express lanes on this segment of the Capital Beltway. So this study moving forward, this NEPA study we're conducting, is really carrying that initiative forward. The purpose and need of our study under NEPA, the purpose and need is looking at expanding and system continuity of an express lanes network on the Capital Beltway. Under NEPA, you are to, would you focus, what is your, I'd say your approved purpose and need that's concurred with your Federal Highway Administration and your concurring agencies is really what your study focuses on. So we've had that question a lot about a predetermined conclusion, but that was really the heart of what we were asked to study. We did have some other study alternatives, 10 at the beginning of the study that we looked at that had some other multimodal components, transportation demand components. And as we've talked about, we've carried those forward, such as a new bus transit component that we've layered into our recommended preferred alternative. We've also layered in some bicycle and pedestrian components that all of these are really hallmarks of our managed lane projects that we've delivered successfully in Virginia over the course of the past 10 to 15 years, and they've been very successful projects. As far as the project moving forward at what maybe appears to be a rapid pace, as I mentioned, we have had this project ongoing since 2022. So this is the natural progression of a NEPA project in Virginia. This is the Virginia model that we use, and I'm sure Ray can comment on this, differs somewhat from the process that is used by Maryland State Highway, but it is an allowable process under the Federal Highway Administration. As we alluded to with our process slide, this is our very first touch point in a long line of process that needs to happen for a project. So this is just the initial point in which we're taking comment, and there'll be many opportunities before the project is finalized and those design details are finalized.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions from the delegates? Well, I have one, and I've asked this several times to both MDOT and certain individuals. If this does happen, and it comes to fruition, the revenue that you will be collecting from our citizens, where is that money going to be expended? Is it going to come back in the Maryland portion, or is it going to be a deferred type of funds for years until you recoup your loss on the construction? Any clue as to the money?
So we've talked about how projects such as these can be delivered, and typically in Virginia, the large managed projects are delivered under a public-private partnership. That means they're built and then operated, they're financed, operated, and maintained by a private concessionaire. The concession terms vary from project to project in Virginia, whether you're looking at, say, our 495 system or our 66 outside the Beltway system. But the project agreements include provisions for toll revenue sharing to be used for future transportation projects. Usually transportation or transit projects, and these could either be service for transit, like new buses, capital improvements, or it could be operating expenses. Most notably in Virginia, usually we have an entity that would govern how the funds are distributed and how the projects are selected. For example, in Virginia right now, there is an entity, NBTC, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and they have what is called the Commuter Choice Program. They take in the annualized payments from one of our concessions, and then there is a call for projects from the localities along that corridor for that concession, and then they look at those projects and they distribute those funds. The Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, they manage the funds that were taken in from the upfront concession payment that was made on the 66 outside the Beltway project. And so they have had a process in which those projects are evaluated and then those funds are distributed. So we would anticipate for the Southside project that there would be a similar type entity in which those future toll revenue payments would be managed and then allocated either for future transit or other projects, depending on, again, the business terms of a P3 project. And those would, again, there is a code section in Virginia. I'm not sure of any code sections in Maryland, maybe Drew or Ray could answer, but the monies that are collected for those concessions in Virginia, there's a code section that they have to benefit those specific corridors in which they're collected. So we would anticipate or expect something similar.
Thank you, because I haven't been getting answers, and my question was whether it was going to be shared with the state, or was it going to be shared with just Prince George's County? So that's where my concern came in. Did you want to touch on that?
And just to add quick to that, I mean, you're talking a decision that should this project move forward, how would that be handled? There is a whole process we would have to undertake in order to come up with what that process would be, what that means, how it is. You know, in Maryland, we have been successful, particularly in the 210 corridor, with some of these efforts to be able to get some of that sharing, working with the county as well. As you know, with MGM, we are using some of that revenue for improvements to the 210 corridor, working closely with Prince George's County, as well as things we've done with our red light cameras and other things that feed back to the local projects to make sure those local projects are able to move forward. But that would really, I mean, we're early in the process to be able to get to the level, and that's some of the things that would need to be worked out prior to us agreeing to a preferred alternative here, and sort of setting a framework for how those concessions or contributions would be handled moving forward.
Great, thank you. You might want to start talking now because this is moving so fast. One of my biggest concerns at the council is just revenue sharing. You know, I've seen projects like this, particularly when they come across a state line to another state, that some of the projects with a state, such as, like say in Virginia, paid for all the construction coming into Maryland to 210. The revenue that was collected was deferred for like 10 years until the public partner or whether the state made construction recoup their losses. And that was why this question came from me. And thank you very much. All right, we have anybody in the public that has questions? We got a couple hands up, Kara. And please, I'm sorry. Okay, NAACP, would you like to make a statement? Okay, Kara. She's over here.
Oh, sorry. I've been blind. Those who are interested, would you line up behind Ms. Sweat so that we can move along, please?
Good evening. My name is Diota Sweat, and I am the president of Charles County NAACP. And I am here opposing this project, and why we're concerned of how the traffic that's coming from the Virginia side will land in a predominantly black and brown community. And in that community, the exhaust, the emission, and all things that are expelled from the vehicles will be a part of that community. We already suffer from asthma and all type of other ailments. On the Virginia side, how the rail, if we've all traveled that way, this expressway does not go through communities and neighborhoods. It's going in through industrial areas, areas that is commercial property, but 210, 295, 495, where this is stopping, according to the project, is in the heart of a lot of neighborhoods. And so we're talking about eliminating traffic, and I saw on the slide it said that you could pass 600 additional vehicles within an hour. That is a lot of pollution that we're now asking for communities to inhale and deal with. And so I think that when this project was thought of, it should have thought more on the Maryland side, because it is going to affect the residents in a greater capacity than it will on the Northern Virginia side. And it's also that was a very long explanation as to how economically this is going to benefit Maryland, because this is 11 miles and it looks like 9 of the 11 miles is in Virginia. And it then connects to another toll road. So that is a complete economic disparity for the state of Maryland if we're moving forward with this. So we need to not only talk about the environmental piece to this, but economically, how is this going to benefit the state of Maryland if we're allowing 600 plus new vehicles to land in a neighborhood that already cannot handle the traffic that they're receiving? So I want our elected officials to really take this under consideration, is that we're already battling a lot of issues with the bottlenecking in that particular area. So this is going to add more problems. And so I'm asking our elected officials to take these matters under consideration. Thank you.
How you doing, Derek Terry? Trying to remember in my business class from decades ago when my professor, we were talking about tolls, and what I remember is tolls equal recouping cost of roads, which equals to maintain the roads, which would equal minimum project management or administrative support. I believe the first three are there, but I'd be curious to know what the project management and admin support is as far as your personnel. Because if the tolls are paid for and recouped, I guess is the revenue being used to provide jobs? Not to say that they're not needed, but the whole purpose of tolls was to recoup those funds for the construction and also maintain the roads. And I don't know if I'm for or against, but what I will say is that having been in Maryland for 40-something years, going back and forth to Alabama to visit a family, I have not been on 95 South in 30 years. I literally go 301. And because it feels like the way in which you are trying to convey this, it's like having a large body of water and you're dumping it into little streams, knowing it's going to flood. Think about it. Large body of water. So you got all this traffic that's going to be dumped in southern Maryland, and you think we're not going to have congestion. And I don't know if any study whatsoever that the average citizen will benefit from congestion. I don't know one. If you can find one, please let me know. And then the last thing is when you look at 210, and let's just be honest, Maryland is in a fiscal, I wouldn't say fiscal crisis, but we're not there yet. And having lived in Virginia, you have tolls that take you to an exit. Don't know why. You know, I think near Dulles. I have no idea why I would have to pay a toll just to get on the street. And I've always looked at Virginia as a money grab, always. And when I'm traveling on that road, and I have an M-Tag or Easy Pass, whatever you want to call it, I'm not paying $22 to get on an expressway just so I can save 5-10 minutes. And to me, that's ridiculous, and that tells me it's a money grab. Because, once again, you're looking to recoup the funds, but you're placing certain costs based on time constraints, which tells me it has nothing to do about recouping the funds. It's more or less how much profit can we make for the state of Virginia.
Yep.
So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Donna Moore, and I live in Prince George's County, born and raised in Charles County. Question to the audience. How many of you, raise your hand, has an Easy Pass? How many of you use it on a daily basis? Keep your hands up. Use it on a daily basis. How much do you pay each time you use your Easy Pass?
Depends on which route I take, but it varies up to $30 a pass one way.
$30 pass one way. Somebody else who uses it daily? My ophthalmologist, lovely man, ophthalmologist. Yes. He lives, his office is in Reston. I don't go to him but twice a year, whatever. From Reston to Prince George's County, we'll treat ourselves when the traffic is backed up. It is $20. Doesn't sound like a much, because we only do it once or twice a year. But for the commuters, you don't pay the $20. You sit in the line with the rest of the people who don't have the $20 a day, one way. How many of you have ever driven down southbound 95 with the Easy Pass? Some of you say you stay on Charles County. How many of you get on that Easy Pass? Or do you sit in that traffic for hours? Or are you coming northbound like I am, seeing the people who can afford the Easy Pass, taking it, and the people who can't or don't want to pay the money? And please understand, I'm going to use some of local roads. Easy Pass, just for reference, starts in Hughesville. From Hughesville to 488, $10. From 488 to Route 5301 is another $10. For you to get to Brandywine, it may be another charge. That's why the young lady here said $30. Easy Pass may work for Virginians. I don't know if it's going to work for Marylanders. I don't know if it works for the people who travel day to day. I had a coworker in Alexandria, lived in Prince William County. She was dropping $20 one way, $20 the next day, trying to get to work on time. And I see this project is due in 2050. In 2020, COVID shut everything down. People picked up those laptops and went home, and they worked. And it worked. 25 years from now, are we not going to have something similar? So is an Easy Pass the future? Is it a privilege of who can afford it or can't afford it? And if you have not driven, take the time, drive down 95, especially now in the summer. Make a road trip, take your kids, take plenty of food and drink. And sit in the traffic and see what it's like to sit in an Easy Pass lane. For the people who have the money and you can zoom by and it's a $20 one trip Pizza Hut pizza, it's not bad. But if I had to sit there every day and take that traffic every day, I can't afford $40 a day, plus gas and insurance. So I implore the Marylanders, and did any of you have an Easy Pass?
I do.
Think about it. An Easy Pass is an Easy Pass for the people who can't afford it. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Barbara Sofel, and I'm chair of Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. Virginia's toll lanes would not resolve congestion on the Beltway in Maryland. It would make it worse. One of the many flaws of toll lanes is that they create huge bottlenecks wherever the toll lanes end. That's because all of the traffic in the toll lanes is forced to merge into the traffic in the general lanes. VDOT's plan is to have the toll lanes end at Route 210. How big would the bottleneck be? Well, based on the experience in Virginia, it would be very big. Years ago, Virginia built toll lanes on the Beltway starting at Springfield and going north towards Montgomery County. The toll lanes ended at Old Dominion Drive. 2 years later, Virginia found that the congestion caused by the merging of toll lane traffic into the general Beltway lanes at Old Dominion Drive caused a 2.5-mile backup during rush hour. VDOT also has a bottleneck in Springfield at the other end of their Beltway toll lanes. They're trying to fix that bottleneck by moving it to Maryland. If this project goes through, we will wind up with worse traffic on the Beltway where the toll lanes end at Route 210. And the traffic jams won't just be on the Beltway. Traffic on Route 210 and other local roads would get worse. How bad would it be? Well, we don't know. That's because VDOT is delaying its analysis of the impact on local roads until after public officials vote on whether to allow the project to go forward. VDOT could and should study the impact on local roads now so that we will know how bad it will be. The toll lanes would block a future extension of Metro's Blue Line into Prince George's County. That's because the toll lanes would take space on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge that is reserved for future rail transit. While Metro is not ready to move forward with the Blue Line extension at this time, the space on the bridge should be reserved for future rail. VDOT should not be allowed to build toll lanes on the bridge, because once they are built, it will be too expensive for VDOT to scrap the toll lanes and allow Metro to build the Blue Line across the bridge. We urge Maryland to block toll lanes on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge and into Maryland. Thank you.
If we could all just keep in mind the times for the elected officials, I appreciate it.
We want to make sure we hear everyone.
Yeah, we want to hear everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for coordinating this in Charles County, where we live, and I live in Bryan's Road, and I am on Maryland 210. Take it every single day that we're going back to work. I work in Alexandria. And I was at your meeting on...
You want to give your name for the camera?
Sure, it's Tammy Crank. And I was at the meeting on June 4th in Oxon Hill. And as I stated, that we are trying our best to be informed about things so that we can be engaged. And we've asked, where was this information shared at? Now, Michelle told me that she would get the information when she was at the May 17th meeting. Then at the June 4th meeting, it was, we never said it, but it's on video. However, Justin, the communication specialist for VDOT, said that it was only shared to 20745. And if that's the case, how is it that you expect us to show up and participate in these things if we're not getting the fair opportunities to do so? And as a person who takes the express lanes, I take them every day. And these express lanes are very clear and empty, but the backup starts at the express lanes because people aren't using them. Now I take them, but I think about those that can't take them. And I only take it because the one exit I'm taking is $3 and some change, but it fluctuates. And I've seen the one to the Pentagon and to Washington, D.C. that say $30 to $40 for one pass. And of course, yes, it's during certain times. I also learned the week before last that they close at a certain time. So if you don't know that and you're going that way, you end up stuck having to go all the way down and take a U-turn somewhere to come back to get to where you are. And that's very inconvenient for someone that is trying to utilize something that's supposed to be a benefit, but it's not coming off as a benefit to those that are actually utilizing it. And then once you get on the express lanes, where I see on Edsall Road where it is backed up at. And it's like, oh my God, look at all of this traffic here. And we could be opening up this road for everyone to use and keeping the flow of traffic going. So what are the solutions for that? Now, Justin also told us that this was an idea for a rapid bus transit system. And I asked him, I said, if that is an idea that you guys have with this process, then why isn't that being disclosed to people? Why aren't we getting the real and transparent information so that we can make conscious decisions to determine if this is beneficial for us or not? So it feels like a bait and switch type of dynamic, which we've seen in times past. And to not be included and then to be thrown in the limelight to say, give us something in a short period of time, doesn't seem really fair and equitable. So I would ask that you guys reconsider your approach and include us next time in your process as you're developing, as opposed to creating something and then coming back to tell us about it, to agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Katrina Moody. First of all, I wanted to say that VDOT, when they started this, why wasn't there some type of media broadcast, televised or something, so that, because it affects Maryland, Virginia, and DC. That way, everybody would have been getting information all along. I've attended 6 meetings out of 8 meetings where this is meeting, and I've talked to people in Charles County, so they didn't know anything about it, including Delegate Patterson, and I don't think that's fair. My feeling about that is it was done purposely, because if people don't know about it, they can't oppose it. So I think it was done intentionally by VDOT. That's my opinion on it. Okay, VDOT didn't want to publicize it because they want to try to force their opinion more so than anything else. The volume of traffic that Michelle mentioned in 2050, okay, that's 25 years from now. The next 25 years, what's going to happen? Every 25 years, you're going to want to add more lanes. You're taking away people's property and everything. What are we going to have? Front door service for express lanes? Pick up at your front door? What we should be looking at is mass transit. Mass transit can accommodate a lot more people than an individual car can. Maybe a SUV, either way. Mass transit can accommodate a lot more people. If you utilize the rail service, it's a lot easier to add on another rail car to accommodate more people. Once you go 2050, 2075, you're going to like, oh, we ran out of space, we need more HOV lanes. What are people going to do? You end up building houses under the express lanes because you're going to run out of property. You're taking away people's property and stuff, and I don't think it's been evaluated and considered. Okay, I've already talked about that. Okay, in Virginia, people were talking about complaining about traffic in their residential area, how they needed things to be improved and everything because the lanes are not sufficient to accommodate the overdevelopment. Okay, I've been down 95, I've seen lights and stuff out. It seems that Virginia needs to be focusing on things they need to do in their state to benefit their people rather than doing some of the things that they're talking about for Maryland. People at the meeting also talked about how the express lanes, people are taking an alternate route, going through the communities. It's backing up traffic in their communities and stuff. And it will be the same thing in Maryland and everything. Anywhere you have the HOV lanes, it's going to be the same thing. I talked about mass transit, okay. This is another way that I see it as far as ripping off people because you're going to promise them one thing and then when it comes up, it's not going to be the way that you predicted or presented it. The lady talking about tolls, $20 is cheap for a toll. And I say that because Tammy, I call her name, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, she spoke one time about someone that worked with her, someone that she was familiar with that paid like $1,800 to $2,000 some dollars a month for a toll. That's an average of $80 some to $100 and some a day to get to work. That's a big chunk of change out of somebody's pocket. I guess they make good money, hopefully. But my thing, either way, you shouldn't be spending that kind of money to get back and forth to work and everything. Lose on that as well. Thank you. Please vote no.
I'm not used to public speaking, so I'm a little nervous.
You're all right.
your name, please?
Patrick. Let's go down memory lane. Over 20 years ago, Republicans were running politics in Virginia. So they did little to no road construction. And with traffic, you know, once you get behind, you're pretty much always behind. So they put on the ballot in Virginia, the sales tax was 4.5%. They put it that they was gonna raise the sales tax 0.5% for it to go to traffic only. A lot of Virginians couldn't get to the polls in time because they were stuck in traffic. I thought that was hilarious personally. But they voted it down. So Virginia can't keep their traffic under control, no matter what they do. They're just trying to kick the can to the Maryland side and dump it all on our side. I heard tolls were up to $30 one way. I heard on the news it was up to $50 for some people one way. So imagine if you had to pay tolls up to $50 or more one way every day. That's ridiculous. Maryland shouldn't allow Virginia to ram this down our throats, because this is ridiculous. Virginia can't keep up with their traffic, period. We seen what the little snowstorm did a few years ago. People stuck in traffic for over 24 hours. You don't hear about that in Maryland. I've never heard of someone stuck in a snowstorm in Maryland for over 24 hours. I don't think any of y'all have either, have y'all? Exactly, that's my point. They said money, I guess Maryland would get some of the money, but money doesn't mean anything if you're dealing with bottleneck traffic. Don't let them ram this down our throats.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Dick, and I'm against this project. And I fought very hard for many years to get rail on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. When I first heard about this project, this toll lane project, they said that the word was that there would be no way to retrofit the bridge back to get rail. And that's changed since that, because that's not very popular, obviously. And the fact that it's a public-private partnership is not an advantage, because the public-private partnership, if anything goes wrong, the private partner leaves. This has already happened to Virginia with one of their projects. And the public picks up the tab. So, not a good idea. And this has been going on for years, a few years. And at the June 2024 Transportation Planning Board meeting, our Reuben Collins, president of the County Commissioners and vice chair of Transportation Planning Board, correct?
Yeah, I was chair.
Chair of the Transportation Planning Board, had an opportunity to vote against this project, but he wasn't present, and his staff person abstained, and we do have a statement that they made, and it is in relation to the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. And essentially, you don't have to be a transit engineer to know having rail on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge will actually be an asset for getting the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. And as a matter of fact, what we should have, what we should have is we should have death to this Virginia study. Maryland should never have let it go so far. And then start a new study at the Transportation Planning Board for a rail connection connecting to the two different rail lines in Virginia across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, come across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge to Branch Avenue and down to Waldorf. One project, not two projects. So voting to allow this project to go further in the process was not a good idea. I'm very happy that you are here sitting and you are against it. Is that correct? You are against it now. And your vote.
We were against it then. That was,
Why didn't you
it was
vote?
playing out. It was playing out because we were supporting Prince George's County. I'll talk to you about it. I'll explain.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm glad you were always against it. That was very disillusioned.
Right.
Okay, so the tens of millions of dollars, we cannot lose that. It's been invested. It was the promise. Virginia said it wasn't a written promise. I don't believe it. I believe that when you put down $10 million, I haven't been able to find it. I tried to get more information from COG, but anyway, we want the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit, but having it as one project makes a lot of sense. So everybody in this room, which is pathetic, why didn't we have more notice? I mean, this is so many, and why isn't this on closer to the 210 corridor? But anyway, there's going to be a vote on September 11th at the Transportation Planning Board. We all have to show everybody from around the region we don't want this, and it's actually an economic cut-up for all Southern Maryland. And on July 15th, you can speak at the Transportation Planning Board if you sign up 1 week in advance.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Harold Jacques. I'm a lovely citizen here in Charles County. I'll keep it brief. I was a little bit disappointed in the commissioners when just hearing about, and the delegates just hearing about this project and not, I'm like, how come they didn't know about this? But once I came here tonight, it made sense, and I digress. That feeling. Because I keep hearing, this is moving fast. This is moving so fast. So it's clear that you guys were not aware, which brought some grace. And I'm so happy to be here tonight. I would like to feel and believe that you guys are closely working with MDOT, which is Maryland. And I would hate to feel as though that Virginia has kind of put a wall between this group hometown. It's clear that Maryland should be biased for this project, and it's clear that Virginia should be biased for the project because that's a project. I've lived in the area for a long time, before Woodrow Wilson Bridge was the size it is right now. Back then, it was a concern of 495, the traffic coming from up north, coming through this little pipe that we had, and they built the bridge bigger. Obviously, I guess that didn't work because it's still an issue. Anyway, they tried it on Route 1 on 95 South. That's forever bottlenecked. And then I moved to DC off of A Street, and they had to build a trolley there off of A Street and 4th Street. And that became a nice project, and they're dealing with that. But I feel sorry for the people living in Stafford, because when I moved to Stafford, and that became popular, Virginia installed HOV all the way down. And the Stafford folks probably went through a similar situation. And it's just, to me, just listening to what the citizens are concerned about here now, it's just, how do we bring this home? I'm a little bit concerned too about the concessions and the partnerships, or this private entity that is going to be the middleman. Are you guys aware of these entities yet? Yes. Those are only my other concern. I feel that even MDOT is is ill-informed about what's going on, and I would really like to understand even where those prior concerns were posted, that we can at least have some kind of history to go back and say, oh, we can see a timeline, which she presented. They have a clear timeline, which is like they're well presented, but it almost feel stupid. Like we don't know what's going on. We feel slow. I mean, it almost seems like, why we look so slow to Virginia? They're like on their A game. we don't know what's going on. So, you know, anyway, I'll put my bachelor degree aside. Thank you guys for being here today. Virginia, thank you for being business-minded. This is what we're here for. Let's do business and figure out how we can share the money.
I'm fast.
Good.
And I don't need a microphone. I don't really need a microphone either, but I will use it. My name is Mary Stokely. I'm a realtor. I've been selling homes in Southern Maryland for a very long time. And so every year, and coincidentally, I live on Crane Highway. So I can tell you how many cars go up and down Crane Highway. Once the nice bridge was enlarged, now we have a number of trucks that cross the bridge that weren't there before. It used to go up 95, so I'm all about putting a toll on that end of the bridge that will cut some of the traffic down. But I have questions, and I think it's to the engineers that brought the project. How many cars on a weekly, not daily basis, come from Virginia cross over the bridge into Maryland that are Maryland drivers? How many vehicles come across the bridge that are continuing to go north to Route 50, to Route 301, to 95, to get through that part of Prince George's County that we would really complicate egress off of the Beltway if we can't move that through state traffic farther north where the roads are much better. Route 50 is certainly much better, and so is 95. And I think that the idea of, I think the complication is we talk about things moving very fast. It's because we move very slow, right? We do. And we do move really slowly once you get farther south. So it seems fast it seems timely to you. It seems like, whoa, we didn't know, and what are we going to do? Because we don't know. How many cars actually cross the bridge every day, I wonder? How many of them are going north all the way? How many really come down 210 or Branch Avenue? And I think if we had a clear understanding of that, I don't know that you need a $20 toll to get off 95, 495, or whatever number it is now, to get onto 210, because that's really not a $20 trip. That's all I have to say.
I'll give you the opportunity Excuse me, good evening. My name is Belinda Watson. I'm a resident of Prince George's County, and I live in Camp Springs. I traveled 495 into Virginia to take care of business one day last week. It was 9:30 a.m., and I didn't want to pay the fee, which was $29.30 at that time. I have been on 495 where the fees have been as high as $45, depending on the flow of traffic. I have attended 3 out of 4 of these last meetings. Interestingly enough, the verbiage and the discussions have changed. A couple of times when Maryland didn't even present, they just said we'd let the citizens say what they have to say. So tonight, to hear Maryland say some additional information that I had never heard before is very interesting to me, because I'm wondering, is this, again, why the presentation is being changed as we go through this process. So, one of the meetings in Virginia, Senator Scott Somerville, if I have his name correct, and Delegate Paul Kurizek, both from Virginia, stated they were not even aware of the project, which makes me wonder exactly what's going on. A number of people here said they had not heard about it, but now all of a sudden, people say, oh, I heard about it a year ago. So I'm not sure, again, how this is even going. It just appears that there's some integrity in the process, totally. There's been an interesting endeavor on the part of VDOT Virginia First, it has been relayed that there was a survey sent out regarding this project. We did an informal survey in our area with several communities in Prince George's County. And interestingly enough, not one household said they had received a survey. When we started asking about it a little bit later, someone said, oh, they selected how they were going to put the survey out. Well, that doesn't seem like that's very fair to me. Second, noticeably each time any type of meeting was offered, Maryland was scheduled for one meeting, while Virginia had 3 meetings. Finally, we see Charles County being invited to the table. Still no Washington, D.C., which is also going to be impacting. Third, the endeavor has been offered as express lanes or managed lanes, conveniently avoiding mentioning of tolls, which is what it is, okay? These situations cast a concern of integrity of the process. Even more concerning, the proposal being offered does nothing for anyone in Maryland, particularly Prince George's County nor Charles County. Our entire Prince George's County Council has voiced their opposition to the proposal, as well as VDOT has said they have some concern, which I will say they did say at one of the meetings. Not sure who is pushing this agenda, but I suspect that people who are looking to make money off of the tolls, and more importantly, those who won't be traveling these already congested roads. Thank you.
Hello, Jessica Jennings. I live in Charles County, moved here 12 years ago. Wasn't quite sure if I was going to say anything, but there's a few points I think I would love to get clarified. What part of the timeline is the designation of the money handling happening? Does that get answered?
You talking to me?
Virginia, you got that part of the timeline you showed? Where is that, where you pick the private person? Where's that at?
On our process slide,
Yes.
under the procurement, that is where we would select.
So is there public input prior to that?
There is additional public engagement prior to that. And in Virginia, we have a statute that governs how our public-private partnership works. That is a decision made with input from our General Assembly as well as our Commonwealth Transportation Board.
So would Maryland also have input on the private part of that, or is it just Virginia that has that say?
As far as selection of the private partnership, it is a procurement process that would be governed by the Virginia statute.
So Maryland wouldn't have any say of who gets to be in charge of the funds?
No. I'm saying in charge of the.
Well, you're saying
So,
that it's,
historically, you have done those in secret to avoid disclosing the terms of the competitive bid.
so we're here trying to
So
find
are
out.
you going to invite Maryland to be on your selection committee
There's
or
certain
not?
business terms that I would not use the term secretive. They are negotiated contracts. So yes, there is not full disclosure on negotiated terms of those contracts.
But what has Maryland said?
But you're talking about
Like, are the Virginia
revenue sharing from the project.
That's another part that I have a question for, yes. So we just want to know that if Maryland, okay, MDOT, when you guys did your study, was there a percentage of how many Marylanders versus Virginia people would be coming over and paying the toll? Would it be mostly Maryland that's giving it and we're not getting anything back?
Yep.
Is that percentage done in the traffic study?
So I think two parts to speak to it, because I think there's a couple of steps in the process. Ultimately, for there to be a P3 in Maryland,
What's a P3?
a public-private partnership, for there to be this project in Maryland, Maryland would have to say to Virginia, you can build it. So that would be a necessary step for there to be a public-private partnership or any sort of contract, is that fundamentally Maryland would have to allow it. We're here listening to folks raising the concerns that exist from a public policy standpoint around a potential project. So that's sort of to that first point. On the second point, there is a traffic analysis. We are reviewing it as part of the overall process. It's part of the environmental assessment. That's the full piece. I wouldn't speak to the overall balance of traffic, but I think we all know that there are folks coming from Maryland who are heading over to Virginia, and there are folks coming from Virginia heading over to Maryland. So there's likely about a mix of both Virginians and Marylanders who, if this project were built, would pay the tolls.
So would that, if there was unbalance, if Maryland was the main person paying it, would that change your views on a proceeding? Was that be a part of the thought process?
These are all part of the elements that we are looking at as part of the data we're getting on what it means, who's using the roadway, how it's being used. All that goes into any decisions made moving forward.
Okay. And all that information will be given at the July meeting, I believe it was? All that will be established, or July?
Down the road, it's way down the road. Before the Transportation Planning Board?
Thank you, yes, that's exactly it. Before the vote, will we have that information available before that, so everybody can have public comment and have that available?
I wouldn't expect that issue to be resolved by the July.
And I would just like to say that in 2022 was when this was started, correct?
Yes.
That is also the year that Charles County became the wealthiest black county, surpassing PG. That's correct. That's when that announcement came out. Just thought I would right now. I thought that was just pretty ironic timing. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, can you give me the mic, please? Any other speakers? And VDOT wanted to answer a couple questions. Sure.
Thank you. There you go, Michelle.
He was gonna talk about some of the traffic split that was asked by one of the ladies. You asked a question about some of the traffic split. We had some percentages about that, whether we could speak to.
So I thought that was a great question to know where people are coming from and going to in both directions of the bridge. That's one of the things that traffic team closely looks at, and that's one of the reasons that we cannot necessarily take some other experiences from other locations and directly apply it. So you have to look at the origin destination patterns for any specific project. So experiences are not easily transferable from one location to the other location. So on the bridge itself, we have looked at origin destination on both sides of the bridge, on both directions. And so I have some percentages in mind, and this also relates to one of the other questions that were that was raised, and it kind of referred to why it suddenly ends at 210. It's going to dump a lot of traffic there. So it's important to look at those percentages. So this was really interesting for myself to find out. From roughly 240, 250,000 vehicles on the bridge, daily vehicles. That's the total number on both directions. About 25% comes from or goes to the first interchange in Maryland. That's Interstate 295. Another roughly, depending on what time of which year, which month you look at, these percentages could be a few percentage points up or down, but take these with a grain of salt. Another quarter of that total volume on the bridge takes off or joins, depending on direction, comes from or goes to 210. So just about 50% of bridge traffic goes to the first two interchanges at 210, and only 50% travels beyond 210. So that's one big reason that's a reasonable place to finish the express lanes. And then when you start, during the first, there was another question that how do we consider the comments received? So we have these conversations, and there was one comment that I personally received at Oxon Hill in April, that someone made a question that why are you stopping it here? You have to continue it all the way to 95 northeast of the region, so all these trucks and cut-through traffic can get off there. But then the situation is we looked at those percentages, and actually the total percentage that goes all the way to that location is in single digits. So we have about 8%, or I don't want to get a wrong number, but if you look at Route 50, north of Route 50, we have maybe just above 10% of the total traffic that goes that far. So a lot of traffic is coming from the first few interchanges.
So interestingly enough, those statistics, when the Middleton Nice Bridge was expanded, I asked for a traffic study to know how much traffic was going to be increased. 30% in just cars, which was not if they don't have to go up 95 and get into the, whatever you call that area over there, they come across the Nice Bridge, they go up Crane Highway, they either take 301 to Baltimore, or they take
Yeah.
Route 5 to either the Beltway or whichever direction they're going. So Charles County has borne a great amount of traffic that Virginia was fortunate enough to be able to defer.
It also sounds.
So, you know, I think we're doing you a big favor, and maybe the toll could be substantially lower, dramatically lower. If they're gonna put a toll, then you've done
It
some
sounds
more
a lot.
traffic.
It sounds a lot like trying to take advantage of National Harbor being in
I
Maryland.
don't think they are trying to take advantage, I think they're
That's the
trying
other-
to do economically what needs to be done. I'm just saying, we have unburdened you dramatically. Charles County has unburdened you dramatically.
I'm saying the tolls ending at 210, that's like you're gonna take advantage of everybody coming to National Harbor.
I can't comment on Nice Bridge, I was not involved, maybe I pass it to my manager, but with respect to traffic for this project, the purpose and need of the project is clear. It's about, one of the purpose and needs are about congestion along this corridor, which both Marylanders and Virginians are suffering from. And there was one comment that Virginia is trying to get the traffic in Maryland. Let's not forget this is a bidirectional situation. So we have major traffic congestion moving westbound in the morning, and we have opposite of that mostly in the afternoon in Virginia. So it's
But you have a lot more
supposed to
lanes
benefit
feeding
both
into the
residents.
bridge. You have a lot more traffic feeding into the bridge than is coming out of Maryland in the morning.
Thank you for that discussion there. Due to time, we only got the place to 8 o'clock. I want to thank VDOT for being here. I want to thank MDOT for being here. But I am going to turn the remarks over to the Delegate Patterson for the closing remarks. Okay?
Thank you very much, George. And I simply want to say that I appreciate the fact that VDOT has come out, that MDOT, they didn't invite us. We invited them because we were not part of the forum, and so they modified their schedules because it's so important. We're Southern Maryland. It's not just Charles County. It's Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's. We know that many of the people who live here in these southern counties also travel 210, 495, etc. And so the modifications to toll roads, etc. would impact their travel. And certainly we're not even talking about the commuter buses that leave out of here. So it's really important that we have this forum. I appreciate the fact that all of you have offered comments. This is my second time attending a forum. I haven't heard that one person to support this project. Not here, nor the others. It's really important that MDOT as well as VDOT hear our concerns, your concerns, because guess what? We represent you. So I want to thank you very much for your candor and more importantly for your civility. That's really important because again, we're all here together with the same mission. And I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleagues for just a few brief moments. Thank you so much, George. I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Kara Franklin, and other staff members for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to be perfectly clear. Again, I live off Bryan's Road, and I've watched the traffic expound and expand. Be clear, I chair House Economic Matters Committee. I want to make sure we don't forget the other thing that we're going to be dealing with. This is always about money. These projects, these construction projects are always about money. And I'll say this because I know that Governor Youngkin in the administration versus Governor Moore's administration had two very starkly different views on procurement, which is another reason I have zero support for this project. Because again, I know that many times, especially from what I've heard from the other side, and I don't want to be partisan, but we understand he's trying to get rid of anybody that looks like me doing business. And so my big concern is what's going to happen and who is going to make money building these, constructing this, who's going to make money off the tolls. And it won't be anybody that looks like me. And I'm not saying that it has to be just people who look like me, but I would like to have a chance to play. What I realize is Governor Youngkin doesn't really follow along those same lines. And that party is trying to get rid of anybody participating in these projects.
Yep.
So, and I'm texting our governor as we speak, because this doesn't need to go further. That ideology doesn't need to be pushed any further. It doesn't need to be successful at any level. We don't need that. We don't need this. And while we were recently informed about this, it does frustrate me to see the impact. But I just want you to understand, we're not helpless. This isn't locked in. This isn't a done deal. We're going to do everything in our power. I'm not trying to hear anything more. I've heard enough. I've read enough. I've talked about it all day. I'm good. It's not a good idea. I think we're doing everything we can to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wilson. I do want to mention, y'all have until June 26th to make your comments. Now, whether you were at the one in Prince George's County and you made a comment, this is another one. There's Charles County. Make another comment. Let your voice be heard. And again, I want to thank VDOT, MDOT. Thank you all for coming. And thank our elected officials. Yes.
His mama spoke for him already.
Oh. Yeah.
Collins first.
Just very quickly, I wanted to say on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, we have not taken an official stand, but I can assure you that as a board, there's total opposition to this project as it has been described to us at this point. We will continue to monitor this, and one thing I will also attempt to do anyway is to have future meetings delivered on the county's website so we can get as much information out directly to the public. So we will make sure as these future meetings come about, the citizens will be informed. So I thank everyone for coming out. This is ongoing. This was an opportunity for me to learn more as well. And so we will continue to provide opportunities for the citizens to be a part of this. Thank you.
And once again, Commissioner Vice President Ralph Patterson, I'm just so happy to have MDOT and VDOT come down here and actually answer questions, because I know that wasn't the case at the last meeting. So I'm just very happy that you guys are actually being present and being able to answer the questions that are being posed by the residents here in the county. And so I'm just glad to hear that, Delegate Wilson, Delegate Patterson, my colleague, Commissioner Collins, we're all on the same page. And, I look forward to putting together an agenda request to make sure that the county knows that we haven't made an official statement that this is not the way to go. And this is probably not going to be the way to go for Marylanders, not just Charles County, but all Marylanders. And so this is very important that you all have come out here to voice your opinion. Glad to see that we're all on the same page and that we can make sure we move forward with this to make sure that, Charles County voices their opinion in unison from La Plata all the way to Annapolis, that, this is not going to be right for us. And so, thank you very much, George.
And with that being said, the Tri-County Council, we haven't had an official stance on where we are, because at the council, it has to go before the executive board and then to our full council, which is all of our elected officials in Southern Maryland, that's Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's. We did at the council, myself and Executive Director John Hartline, put a letter together to send to the Secretary of Transportation at VDOT, where we had concerns, and those concerns were, of course, relating to the 2 extra lanes that were set aside for WMATA for future rail expansions. So we have not heard a comment yet back, but just stay tuned. This is something that I'll have to bring to the board for where our stance is. I love my job, so I got to take it back to the office there. Again, thank y'all and thank everybody for coming.
Great job.
I want to give a big thanks to Mike Helm out there at Charles County Public Schools.